Indiana's 19th Senate District. Life moves at a different rhythm than one you hear at the State House. It sounds like shift whistles before sunrise Friday night lights in small town stadiums and families trying to make a living in communities where everyone still knows your name. But across Bluffton, Hartford City, Portland, and southwest side of Fort Wayne, people are asking the same question heard all across Indiana. Who is fighting for working families now? Tonight's guest is stepping forward with an answer. A Democrat running in a district long shaped by Republican leadership, bringing a campaign focus on jobs, healthcare, education, and rural investment. Because in places like District 19, politics aren't abstract. It's personal, it's economic, and it's about whether the next generation can build a future without leaving home to find it. Good evening and welcome back to Hold 'em Accountable, the show where we cut through the noise, follow the facts, and keep the focus where it belongs, on the people of Indiana. Tonight's guest is Timothy Murphy, the Democratic candidate for Indiana State Senate District 19. District 19 reflects much of small town and working class Indiana, with strong agricultural roots, local manufacturing, and families deeply invested in their schools, churches, and community traditions. Murphy is running on issues many Hoosiers here feel every day: economic opportunity, affordable health care, strong public education, and renewed investment in rural and small city communities. Tonight, we go beyond campaign messaging to ask what he would actually do in the state Senate, how he'd work across party lines, what real change could look like for District 19. Tim, welcome to Hold 'em Accountable.
Thank you, Derek.
District 19 includes rural towns and small cities facing population decline. What's your concrete plan to bring sustainable economic growth without losing community identity?
So I looked at some of the county statistics in terms of their population changes, and you're certainly right that two of the counties, Blackford and Jay counties, have had um, pretty steady population decline since about 1970. Two of the other counties, Wells and Adams, are fairly stable with a bit of growth. But this is a very difficult challenge in some ways when you're talking about 55 plus years. I'm from Kentucky originally, so I've been in Allen County for the past 7.5 years, and so I'm from Paducah, Kentucky, 2 hours southwest of Evansville, and the counties around Paducah had the exact same problem. Not a lot of economic opportunities. Folks that graduate from high school almost immediately leave. I mean, I myself am not living in the town I grew up in. So it one thing I don't like when I hear from candidates or politicians is someone just saying they've got all the answers. And anyone who just says, if only we did this, it'd all be great. Vote for me. I'm the only one who can fix it. That for me is just like an immediate red flag of, whoa, whoa. If anyone had a clear cut answer, then the, they would be the most popular consultant or candidate in the country because they would have solved it. I mean, what, maybe half the counties, two-thirds, three-quarters of the counties in the country are losing population just because of the way globalization has worked, where places that have resources kind of compound on themselves, and those that are a little more marginal in terms of where industry is or roads just kind of get left behind. And so I don't have an easy answer to that, but I would want to look and see, are there places elsewhere in Indiana or around the country that people have um, had policy recommendations that have actually worked and helped stabilize communities, and kind of look at those best practices and advocate for that. I will say you did forget Decatur when you mentioned
Mhm.
the towns, and people in Decatur would go, wait a second, that um, but that's kind of my initial thought, is that this is decades in the making, is complicated. And I'd also, I've been connected with the Indiana Rural Summit, and so there's a lot of other candidates there, and so there's ones who might have other ideas, and because we can't all be policy experts on every little piece. I, honestly, I was not part of District 19. I've lived in where I've lived for 7.5 years since moving here for work, but I wasn't even part of District 19 until the redistricting took place in 2021, where before none of Allen County was part of District 19. They had broken up Allen County into three different districts, which already was pretty bad. And they said, "Hey, let's do a fourth." And so they took this kind of little sliver, about 10% of Allen County, and added it into District 19. And so that was the my kind of first exposure to kind of the broader district and going, oh my goodness, this is a huge huge area. Um,
Mhm.
and so I'm still learning a lot of from a lot of the communities there. I've got a full time job, part time campaign early in the season, so that I need to hear from a lot of people, especially in Blackford and Jay counties, which I hadn't really had a chance to experience much until even the last year of just starting to get to know people and so forth, because it's a huge district, and a lot of the places I spend time, where my work is, where my grocery store is, are in different districts than even where my district is in, because within like 2 miles, you got two other districts.
Mhm.
So it's just, I live in Fort Wayne, but I'm in District 19, and which was part of the motivation to even run, was to go in 2022 when there was no one running other than the incumbent, not even an option. And I've basically been angry for 4 years, saying we need options. So I have a lot to learn from folks in Adams, Wells, Blackford, and Jay counties. But that's what I want to kind of learn from them. But what are they thinking? What are some of their needs? And so that's also going to come back on some of the questions I think you're going to ask tonight. Is that I need to hear from them, and what are their insights versus me just theoretically saying, oh, we should do this, oh, we should do that, without context on the ground.
So, in your area, manufacturing and agriculture are economic pillars. How should Indiana support these industries while preparing for future workforce changes?
Well, in some ways, in terms of manufacturing, that's we often associate that with union jobs, and a lot of um, private union jobs are almost not outside, and outside of some automotive industries, almost non-existent at this point. So in some ways, it's the past is the future. In I would love to see right to work laws abolished to make it much easier for unions to be formed for places. As far as agriculture is concerned, it's a huge kind of cultural pillar, I would say. I looked up, and I think it's helpful to have good data, and so I looked at the Hoosiers by the Numbers website, just to kind of look at where are jobs, how are they actually divided up in the different counties. And in most of them, Blackford, um, Jay, and no, Blackford, Wells, and Adams, only 2% of the workforce is in agriculture, and that includes forestry, fishing, hunting kind of jobs. Um, Now, I think Blackford, something like maybe 70% of the county is agriculture, like farmland. So that means that literally 2% of the population owns 70% of the county. So if we think of like small farmers, my father-in-law was a small farmer. He had his main full-time job, but he also loved land, and on the side, raised cattle on some acres. But I don't know if it, made much money, but it was because he loved the animals, and he loved the land and the process. And so there is a whole saying being helpful to agriculture is like, we're talking about big ag, we're talking about small farmers. How many small farmers are there? Are there people who want to be involved in farming, and it's just not currently economically viable? I know in some ways, like 80% of Americans live in metro urbanized areas, but are 80% of us meant to live in those places? Maybe it's that we actually be happier being around forests and trees and greenery, but there's not those jobs. And so if there's ways of making it support for smaller farms to be viable, so it's not just big ag. Now we still need big ag in terms of making sure everyone has enough to eat. Um, Not everyone's going to be a micro farmer or something, but I think it's helpful to be cognizant of it has a big impact visually and culturally, but in terms of jobs, I think probably more people work at the Walmart than in the farms at this point. Um, but for but most of them don't have very strong labor protections or worker rights at all.
Healthcare access is a major concern in rural counties. I know Blackford and Jay have IU hospitals there. What policies would you pursue to ensure residents don't need to travel long distances for basic or emergency care? What keeps them out of Indianapolis and Fort Wayne and
But
keeps them closer to home?
well, it part of it is a lament of where we are right now. So it's not the quality of care is very limited in some of these counties. So in Blackford, to my understanding, the Blackford Hospital has no ER. It's almost all kind of primary care and preventative. But if you have an emergency, I don't believe they provide treatment there. And the Bluffton um, Hospital in Wells County, they closed their entire birth department, the birth unit. You cannot. I mean, if you want to give birth in a hospital, you got to go somewhere else. Um, and so some of that has been some of it is hard to recruit. It's always been hard to recruit doctors into smaller hospitals. But part of it is there's policies in our state that have made OBGYNs not want to work at all in not just Bluffton or Blackford, but Indiana, period, with a lot of the restrictions that came in place after 2022 on reproductive care and access. And people can have the feelings they have on abortion, but it's the same OBGYNs that are providing primary care for people to give birth. And so right now, there's so many things that healthcare is essentially a market failure in our country, that it's not profitable in a lot of places, and if it's not profitable, it just isn't there. And there's a lot of things that need to be on the federal level. um, I don't know, Kelly Thompson's been saying a lot about that, but on the state level, we're not doing anything to like move things in the right direction. We're only kind of exacerbating those problems. And so you almost need to kind of lament the harm that's been done, staunch the bleeding, and then see what is possible to actually re-incentivize hospitals, genuine not-for-profit hospitals, to actually for care, and not, well, we're losing money in this county, so we're not going to offer them. There's people there. They need health care. It doesn't. It's
I
why.
mean, what happens when a farmer gets ran over by a combine?
Yeah, you right.
So pretty much what you're saying is we need an ER for the ERs.
I, it the district is at least about 60 miles from end to end. Um, and I suppose folks might be able to go to Decatur if they were in Bluffton. That might be closer than Bourne, but it's still best case scenario 25 minutes, and emergencies are emergencies. It's not like I've got a sty in my eye. Better see a doctor the next few days. No, these are very time sensitive kind of things. Life or death makes a difference there, and just part of my hope is that even just by running it, because no one's even run in 16 years in the district, and so maybe it actually would force whoever's on the Republican side to actually talk to people and advocate for them, because right now they don't really have to do anything because there's no competition. They don't have to do anything, and so um, yeah.
Public schools in smaller districts often struggle with funding and teacher retention. What changes do you think about that we can push in the state Senate to strengthen rural education? How do we keep teachers where
So
we need?
I've got a small scale idea and a completely unviable idea. I'll do the small scale one first. The small scale one is, people talk about charter schools and private schools, and some of the counties don't have any charter schools. And so there's literally the funding for public schools also gets shared with charter schools. I'm not a huge fan of charter schools, but I almost feel like that ship has sailed in terms of um, that. But at a minimum, having required financial transparency for any school, public, private, charter, that receives public funding. Because right now they can just kind of use the money however they want. And so if they're competing with public schools without public accountability, that seems really problematic in terms of public schools. Now, on a broader issue, that doesn't really solve teacher retention. Part of the issue is the way we fund schools is largely local property taxes. And so wealthy places have more resources, places with less resources have fewer. And so, in some ways, we don't fund education the way based off need. Like in a world that I don't see happening anytime soon, though my campaign is called Let's Make the Impossible Possible, I would think that teachers should be paid the most in places where there's the greatest need. And if it's like a kind of a cushy, near retirement kind of position, maybe you don't need as much money because it's a real comfortable thing with not a lot of drama or difficulties or challenges. But that's completely the opposite way of the way schools are funded, and it would get in the way. It would start messing with local property tax ish. So I mean, that's I don't see a way to do that right now, but it's a challenge. It's my sister is a teacher in Kentucky, still in our hometown, and so she does it because she loves teaching and she loves the students, and it's not because of the pay or also interference that she gets from um, state and federal policies.
How do we keep people from leaving Portland and Hartford City? Young people who just graduate high school. How do we keep them in the area? How do you create reasons for them to stay, work, and raise families locally?
That is a big challenge. I will say, I mean, I'm here in Fort Wayne for job opportunities. I'm not in my hometown, and so I understand. I am emblematic of the challenge, and part of me wishes that at times that I could live in Paducah and that there were a job that I could do there. Um, so this has been going on for a long time, 2, 3 generations. I think there are some things that maybe could be done that, again, they don't solve the issue per se, but they can be helpful. And I think that part of it relates with there's so few places, whether in small towns or even mid-sized towns, that are not either work or home. And people talk about third places. And so churches are third places, but not everyone's, wants to go to a church on a weeknight unless you're doing a Wednesday night Bible study, whatever. But like more third places, like maybe incentivizing communities, maybe providing funding for more third place community centers where people on weeknights can hang out and build community and gain a sense of belonging with others. Um, which a lot of the time people stay somewhere is because they get us those connections, and so forth. And the job is obviously important, but that sense of belonging also really helps. Another kind of wild idea. It's like you can call it make rail great again. Is I don't know if you're familiar with the Midwest Interurban Rail that was in place for decades. I looked at a map and it just infuriated me of like the rail map in Northeast Indiana, where there used to be connections to Ossian and Bluffton and Decatur, and maybe even Bern. I'm not sure, but lots of like little of the smaller towns all connected together. And there were like someone showed me at my church a postcard that like some teenagers, there were like these like stations at the end of the line, and they would like hop on it for fun and fill out a postcard and send it back to the family, be like, hey, we're doing this thing, because it was cool to go to Bluffton, be like, and so the thing that my wife and I wanted to take a trip to Scotland. We've been wanting to do this for years. And last spring, we visited Scotland. And there was this little town called Pitlochry, maybe 3,000 people. And they had a train stopping by every hour, town of 3,000, because it was just there. And so then the town was close to the rail station. And so there were things to do. And it was, it's a small, modest place. And they were more of like maybe an art town, but having a center that draws people there and has for other people not just opportunity while you're working there, but people who don't live there to go there. Um, I in terms of before the campaign, in terms of going to Decatur, there were some church meetings to go to, and the eclipse in 2024. It's just you need having those things, those connections, so that even if you can make a life in a place, even if maybe other jobs and so forth are in other places. Those are some of my ideas. I think Indiana has a whole rule about we can't even get trains between major cities, much less small towns. But I feel that strongly for not just economic reasons, but also reasons of inclusion and mobility for people who can't drive. A lot of folks who are older. Um, anyway, I feel really strong about that one, but I recognize that rail advocacy is not going to be like the thing that pushes me over the line on the the campaign. But I care about it a lot, and giving alternatives to driving, because a lot of people can't.
Southwest Fort Wayne brings urban adjacent challenges, different from smaller towns. How would you balance policy for both rural and suburban voters in one district?
I didn't choose the district. The district it's kind of progressive residential areas of the '07 and the airport of Allen County and Fort Wayne, and then the four counties: Wells, Adams, Blackford, and Jay. But for me, it's not so much balancing; it's focusing on whatever helps people live a thriving lives in whatever place they happen to be. And so the focus is, how do we help people improve their quality of life and be able to live lives of dignity and with opportunities wherever they are. And so that's the same. It just might look different in terms of what it means in terms of Allen County, which has grown. It's grown a lot in the past, 30 years. It's grown, tens of thousands of people. It's one of the more popular counties people are um, moving to. But there's still tens of thousands of people in each of all those other counties, and people want to live there and have a life there. And so um, I don't find that to be a conflict in the same way. And I think a lot of people um, are connected with different parts of the county. A lot of people will probably go shopping in Fort Wayne, though I think that Jay and Blackford are so much further south that it might actually be going to Muncie as far as shopping and some works things.
Mental health and addiction services remain limited in parts of the district. What investments would you prioritize to address this crisis?
Goodness, I've been advocating for this in Allen County for years. Mental health is critically underfunded. I think everyone agrees with that, and it seems to be that our state just can't help but want to cut funding and resources. And ta- we, Indiana in general likes to say, low regulation, low tax state. But the cost of that is you don't have services that actually from people who need it. And I don't think that mental health is a partisan issue or shouldn't be a partisan issue. I don't think there's statistically significant differences or disparities between Republicans, Democrats, and independents on people going through mental health crises. So it's it's needed, and honestly, it can be even harder in rural counties where, like in Allen County, there's some things that they're kind of tailored to certain populations, communities, but there's kind of not a broad-based piece. And in other counties, there may not be anything other than maybe like Zoom telehealth therapist, but something in crisis. There are so many things that I think of as market failures. That if we say, well, the market will provide this, if there's a need, but there's not a capability to make it financially viable, and that's the key place for me where state um, needs to come in and say this is a need, that this is clearly a need, but there's no way that the market alone is going to just cover that. And so and then there's all you get weird policy things where people find it advantageous to demonize those in addiction, facing addiction, those with mental health crises, because maybe they um, maybe have run-ins with law enforcement and so forth, and they're in and out of jail because that's the only place to take them. And so people are like, well, we don't want to give funding to people criminal, and so you get all this demonization garbage, which I don't have a lot of patience for. It clearly wins votes because people keep doing it. They've been doing it for decades, but um, I'm not going to demonize, and I'm going to advocate that regardless of people's ability to pay or where they live, they need these resources because everyone should be able to live lives of dignity. And if you're in crisis, um, that's not who I believe we're meant to be, and that we can do better. I want to live in a state that treats people with dignity, and that's what I'm trying to do.
As a Democrat in a likely Republican controlled Senate, How would you build coalitions strong enough to pass legislation, not just make statements?
Well, that is a challenge. As of this moment, the Senate is, I think, 39 Republicans, 10 Democrats, and one vacancy. And it was 40-10. So let's say I win. It would take a lot based off the presidential vote in 2024. You would need a 50-point swing for me to get 50%. Okay, well, that's a lot. But let's say it happens. The impossible becomes possible, and I win. Well, now it's 39-11. Okay, well, that's still a supermajority of Republicans running things if everything else was the same. So I will say, if there's any issues with there is overlapping interests, maybe we have different reasons for it, but we can get on board it. So let's say parental leave. Indiana has no minimum paid parental leave. I would like to see at least 13 weeks paid parental leave everywhere. There might be some conservative pro-life folks that also believe in parental leave to make it easier to have kids. Now, they might have a different reason for supporting it, but I can work with someone if we have a similar idea of what needs to happen, even if we have different motivations for it. I'll work with them on that. I have no issue with that. I'm fine with coalitions of convenience, coalitions of the moment, and then then we can fight about something else. But I will say it very well could likely be that more of what I would end up doing would be opposing things that the supermajority would be doing in the state, trying to tweak things, make some amendments where possible, and then if and when it gets passed over my objection, lament it, have press conferences, raise awareness in the community of what we're trying to do and what the obstacles are for that. I don't. I feel like I spend a lot of my time as a pastor speaking up for justice and spending a lot of time, maybe 80% of the time, losing. So I could just take that skill and apply it at the state senate, and I think I'd be well served. But maybe to find those 20% where we can, see improvements and so forth, and still keep pushing for a broader vision of what would be healthier, more life giving in our state.
Why you? Why now?
Well, as I said, no one has run at all here since 2010 in terms of even having a choice other than Travis Holdman. And it doesn't have to be me. Someone else could do it. But I wasn't willing to just do nothing. I felt it was imperative to stand up to say, even if it's impossible, even if it takes a 50-point swing, which I'm not my future life plans are not contingent on that kind of switch. You need options. And if we're going to have a healthy representative democracy, you got to have options. Got to be able to choose between things. And I really think that a lot of the challenges, there's a connection between the policies that we're not able to get through and the weakness, frankly, in our representative democracy in Indiana. There's a relationship there. And so that's a two-sided piece. So I'm going to advocate for better spaces for Hoosier Democratic participation, including ballot initiatives. That actually be, I think, of anything, probably the most important thing. If you could get that through, that would be it. Because then, even if you can't get a governing majority for progressive issues in the state, if you got a majority of voters, they can have a ballot initiative and approve it. Minimum wage increase, child care subsidies, opening up reproductive access. Again, that's the most important one. It just because that actually gives us a space for democratic deliberation and input outside of, well, people voted for the people they had, so they must not have a problem with it. So I don't have a lot of ego in this race. I just want to see healthier policies, healthier systems that are easier for us to have, healthier communities. And so I'm very pragmatic in that way. And so what works, what's possible, and then also holding out that vision of what we want to see, even if it is impossible in the short term, because I believe there's a need for like idealism and pragmatism combined. And so I do that in my everyday life. I do that in my ministry as a pastor, and I'm doing that as a candidate on this very part-time basis while doing lots of other things and traveling around 5 different counties and meeting people as I can.
Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Worth, and I'm running for Indiana's 6th Congressional District. I'm a lifelong Hoosier. I grew up here in Columbus. I went to school here, met my husband here, raised my family here. I've served my community as a public school teacher for more than a decade, and ultimately, it was that experience that motivated me to run for public office. Any good teacher knows that the struggles of a working class family will affect a child in the classroom. That's how topics like access to education, affordable housing, healthcare, fair wages, and a safe environment became the platform on which I built my campaign. I pursued and completed a congressional fellowship which allowed me to study bipartisan policy writing alongside lawmakers in Washington, D.C. I've been engaging voters in the 6th District since 2022, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know so many incredible people. It will be an honor to soon be your voice in Washington because you are worth every moment of this fight. I'm Cindy Worth, and I approve this message.
Timothy, we've talked about the future of District 19 jobs, schools, healthcare, and the realities families face every day. But now it's time for the part of the show where the answers get shorter, the choices get clearer. No speeches, no talking points, just instinct. This is Hold 'em or Fold 'em. I'll give you a statement. If you agree, you hold them. If you don't, you fold them. One sentence to explain if you must.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Hold them as a yes, fold them as a no. I might say yes or no. I'll try to say hold them, fold them as I can.
Let's play. Indiana should increase funding for rural hospitals and clinics, even if it requires reallocating state dollars.
Yes, that's a hold them.
Public schools should be fully funded before expanding voucher programs further.
Yes, hold them.
Legalizing marijuana in Indiana would bring economic and criminal justice benefits.
Hold them. Overall, I think maybe medical marijuana in the short term is probably more likely to pass, and I'd be satisfied with that as an income.
The state should do more to protect small family farms from corporate consolidation.
Hold them, absolutely, though I'm not sure how many small family farms there even are at this point. We need more. We need to help grow them.
Mental health funding deserves major statewide expansion.
Hold them, absolutely. Critically underfunded.
Workforce training and apprenticeships should be a top economic priority.
I'm struggling with top. It's super important and needed. I don't know as compared to other things, but overall a hold 'em, yes.
Bipartisanship only matters if it produces real results for constituents.
Working with the other party is good if it produces other results.
Yeah.
Yes to that.
Property tax relief should focus first on homeowners and seniors.
Certainly not businesses. The property tax change basically mainly helped businesses and not homeowners and seniors. So hold them.
State government should invest more heavily in rural broadband and infrastructure.
Hold them, not Elon's satellites. No physical infrastructure, real infrastructure that's beyond the whims of multimillionaires.
Your first responsibility as a senator should always be to District 19 voters over party leadership.
My first responsibility?
Yes.
Hold them, yes.
Timothy, thank you for being here tonight, stepping up into the conversation, answering difficult questions, and choosing to run for public office in a time when doing so demands real courage. Running for the state senate means more than campaigning. It means standing in front of your neighbors and saying, I'm willing to be held accountable. In communities like Bluffton, Hartford City, Portland, Southwest Fort Wayne,
and
Decatur, I got it. That willingness matters because families here aren't asking for politics. They're asking for opportunity, for stability, for the chance to build a future without having to leave the places they love. Whether voters ultimately choose you or someone else, democracy is stronger when people step forward to serve and when communities stay engaged in shaping their future. So, Timothy, thank you for bringing your voice, your vision, and your commitment to District 19 to this table tonight. We appreciate you being here. And to everyone watching at home, Indiana's future won't be decided by party labels or headlines. It will be decided by informed voters, engaged communities, and citizens willing to stay part of the process. Because democracy isn't something we watch, it's something we do. So stay informed, ask questions, and as always, hold them accountable.